Hi everyone, welcome to Rona is Reading. Today I'm going to be talking about everything I read in the month of January. A lot of good books, some mid ones. Let's jump into it. I read 12 books in the month of January, quite a few volumes of manga and shorter books, as well as some rereads that I really thoroughly enjoyed. I've lumped all of the Witch Hat books together again. I did kind of read these spread out throughout the month, so this was Witch Hat Atelier, volumes 3 through 6. These volumes are kind of quickly chomping their way through the first bigger arc of Witch Hat, kind of introducing various side characters' goals and their deeper selves as the kids travel, take a test, and begin to uncover some of the sus things about Quivery, their teacher. I really love how Shirahama approaches character work. Not only do the characters of Witch Hat all have well-realized goals and insecurities and little quirks, but as they learn these about one another, they really begin to work together as a unit. They're just a little found family and community of people on the outskirts of witch society. Surely nothing could go wrong. My favorite arcs explored here were Weenie and Riche's, which tied in pretty flawlessly with the series' overall exploration of teaching and learning styles so far. These were less engaging volumes for me just because I feel like I've read the evil forces attack kid characters a lot, but overall, I'm really loving this series. The art is only getting better and better, especially the creature designs here. The songs I picked for these to go on my 2026 reading playlist, which essentially is just to help me remember the books I read a little better and to interact with them in like a creative way, was My Silver Lining by First Aid Kit, Three Hearts by ACS, Carry On Comfort by ACS, and The Carnival of Animals, Aquarium by Camille Saint-Saëns. The next book I read was Midnight Timetable by Bora Chung. This was a little audiobook short story anthology I read kind of at the start of the year. Midnight Timetable is a connected anthology of ghost stories all set at a research institute which takes care of haunted items in various ways. This was a very quick read. I like Chung's way of exposition here, telling the story and then also having meta commentary more from like quote unquote author perspective about the biases and stuff that are inherent in the specific story. And then all at the same time, over the course of this anthology, we're unraveling what exactly this featured institute is up to. It's very Magnus Archives, if Magnus Archives focused on the artifact storage. The stories themselves were kind of hit or miss for me, often more melancholy than spooky, although that's okay. The authors afterward made me like them a lot more in retrospect, because the central question of who takes care of the dead when they can't help but haunt us is really intriguing and has stuck with me since I've finished this book. I'll definitely be picking up more Bora Chung in the future. This was a good one. The song I picked for this was Barking Dog by Phantogram. The next book I read this month was Parable of the Talents by Octavia Butler. This is the sequel to Parable of the Sower that I read last year. It follows Lauren Olamina and a few other related characters as Lauren continues to work to get her religion, Earthseed, off the ground. Through that, she's facing complications to her original very pastoralist, idealist plan via coming into contact with a startlingly brutal and pretty prescient political extremist group. Yeah, definitely look up the content warnings for this one. Though I did rate this book lower than the first one, I still think it's one of the most pivotal dystopias you can read in the current moment. It's very self-aware, and through the addition of perspectives outside of Lauren Olamina, you kind of get a sense of the world at large, more so than you did in the first book. Butler, as always, has this understanding and nuanced exploration of people's darker sides. Honestly, my main critique and disagreement with this book is just that though I like Earthseed as a concept, the idea that God is change is very, very compelling. Fundamentally disagree that the inevitability of humanity is to colonize other planets. It's like just a very startlingly uncomplicated settler colonialist fantasy for an otherwise very nuanced book to be featuring. Kind of unsure that it actually works without a third installment to complicate that, like how this book complicates the first one. That said, rest in power, Miss Butler. You are a sci-fi queen, as always. The songs I picked for this one were Shuffle by Penelope Scott and Day One from the Interstellar soundtrack. Don't think about that one too hard. The next book I read this month was Angelica and the Bear Prince by Chung Nguyen. Angelica and the Bear Prince follows Angelica, or Jelly, which is the cutest nickname I've ever heard. Angelica is struggling with burnout, so cuts her extracurricular activities to one theater program internship. There she meets, or re-meets, Gable, the grandchild of the theater's owner, and the person in the Bear Prince mascot suit in the play that they're putting on. What follows is a romance that pulls together Jelly's whole community to share warmth and maybe save the play. This was exactly the sort of community-driven, full-cast, queer-inclusive rom-com that I needed to start the year off. It's so hard to find books that are fluffy without losing their depth, and Angelica and the Bear Prince just does that easily. Angelica and the Bear Prince kind of solves that problem by contrasting a deep conversation about grief and burnout alongside the romance arc. Also, each character is well realized and just works. The art, like everything by Nguyen, is gorgeous. So, 10 out of 10, no notes, 5 stars. And, here's some reviews that I read of this book that I now very much disagree with, to the point where they kind of made my blood boil. People who, quote, didn't like it as much because it was less emotional than The Magic Fish. Quote unquote, not what I expected after The Magic Fish. And, hey, guess what? Angelica and the Bear Prince is not The Magic Fish. It does its own thing, and, like, I don't know. What do you mean it's less emotional? Is joy not a valid emotion? Is love not, like, a valid emotional range to explore? I just don't know why people rated this book low, because it wasn't another book. Like, authors are allowed to rate books that are different. Anyways, that just annoyed me. Sidebar over. The song I picked for this one was Winter, Nocturne of Ice, from the Stardew Valley soundtrack. Next up was another romance novel that I actually really liked. I'm hoping I'm getting better at choosing ones I like, and this isn't just a fluke. This was You Should Be So Lucky by Sebastian. This book is set in mid-20th century America and follows the romance between Eddie O'Leary, a former star baseball player having a maybe career-ending batting slump, and Mark Bailey, a reporter grieving a deceased partner who's assigned to cover O'Leary kind of out of the blue. This was Baby's first sports romance and a recommendation from the iconic Carrie Can Read channel. I had a good time. I had a great time even though the narrator of the audiobook was trying to do some sort of New York accent and failing. I got used to that after a while. I also had actually read one of the books that the characters are discussing in this book, which was The Haunting of Hill House, and though I didn't love that book, the discussion of it here made me like it a lot more in retrospect. It also made me feel like I got a good grade in reading Haunting of Hill House, because I also picked up on the thing that Mark is picking up on. That's neither here nor there. There's very little baseball, save for discussions of statistics and team culture, but the cast of characters here was diverse and very well actualized and vibrant, all these things. I especially liked Mark's grief arc and his co-reporters / mentors development I just like. And yeah, I'll echo what I've heard several people say about Sebastian's books, which is that it's kind of just nice to read a book in a historic setting where gay people exist and are living their lives despite the discrimination of the time, which is a wild concept, I know. The song I picked for this was Super Bowl Sunday by The Brook and the Bluff. I went on a decently sized vacation this month and ended up raiding one of my good friend's Animorphs shelves and continuing reading that series in print. The next book I read was The Experiment, which is Animorphs number 28 by K.A. Applegate. If you don't know, Animorphs follows 6 kids who can morph into various animals as they try to save the Earth from the Yeerks, an invading alien slug force who can take over the minds and bodies of humans and, other alien creatures. Number 28 follows Axe as the squad embarks on, maybe the goofiest filler novel mission yet. They have to invade some animal testing facilities and hijinks ensue. Cow hijinks. Axe is always just like a delightful character to read, though he is kind of mismatched with this specific book with themes of free will, animal testing, animal consent, etc. Still, it is a really good time, even if I'm astounded that no one fell off that truck. How did no one fall off that truck, guys? How did we not fall off the truck? Somebody should have fallen off the truck. The song I picked for this one was Wild and Free by Rednecks, which, yeah, it's just a barnyard reference. Get silly with it. The next book I read this month was The Sickness, which is Animorphs 29. The Sickness kind of takes every single Cassie development moment so far and catches it in all in one go to great results. It's absolutely wonderful. Animorphs 29 follows Cassie as she finds out that an ally is in grave danger and has to go rescue them. It's just like an excellently tense book that tests just how far Cassie is willing to go to make good on her ideals, and if she'll make some exceptions. It's really tense, being more or less a race against the clock, and very clearly an iconic Animorphs book for a reason. I want to say more, but I can't say more without spoilers, but the ending did make me tear up a little. The song I picked for this one was Dance to Another Tune by First Aid Kit. A lot of First Aid Kit this month. I like them a lot. The next book I read was a vacation reread. This was Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. I just kind of had to read this because I was going to a cold place, and also I remembered how much I like Novik's fairy tales after reading Summer War back in December. Spinning Silver follows Miriam, the daughter of a maybe too polite moneylender. When she takes over her father's work, ends up making a very dangerous deal with a Fae King. There's 2 other perspective characters, Irina, a duke's daughter, and Wendy, a poor girl from an abusive household. The 3 of them end up as unlikely and sometimes uneasy allies as they try to change their fates to gold. Oh yeah, and also it's a Rumpelstiltskin reimagining, by the way. This book is one of those that feels perfectly written to match my specific reading tastes. It was as perfect on reread as it was when I first read it. It's doing so much with reclaiming harmful tropes, with fairy tale form, with granting its characters just agency over their lives, something I haven't experienced a ton of, and it all just works. This reread, I especially noticed and loved the way the POVs shift and expand and include other characters as the story becomes more and more complex. A lot like a moving tapestry. This book also has a lot to say about ousting abusers and recognizing where harmful actions are coming from, if these can be reasoned through or if the demons have to go. which is thematically really balanced and nuanced while still, like, ousting abusers. 10 out of 10. Spinning Silver is fully a book I will come back to again and again. The songs I picked for this book were Pomegranate Seeds by Julian Moon and I Found a Way by First Aid Kit. Can you tell? I was listening to a lot of First Aid Kit this month. And then the last book I read this month was The Oathbound by Mercedes Lackey, not to be confused with Oathbound from the Legendborn series. This is a book in the Valdemar saga, which I'm slowly reading over time. I'm trying to read like at least 2 or 3 books from it per year. The Oathbound follows 2 sword-sworn platonic partners, Tarma and Kethri, as they bop around the world of Valdemar at the whims of Kethri's magical sword, Need, which draws them to women in need. At the same time, they are dreaming of refounding Tarma's clan, who were all slain by bandits before this story begins. This is fully a 1980s women's rage book to its core, with all that entails. I am kind of looking forward to getting into the later books in Valdemar, just because this book was, like, very hit or miss with its moments. I really, really like Tarma and Kethri as a duo, particularly because they have a pretty explicit queer platonic situation going on, which is cool to see in an otherwise pretty pulpy sword and sorcery book from 1988. Although the conflation of infertility with asexuality and non-binary identity did kind of make me cringe a little in the, oh, Mercedes, this wouldn't fly in 2026 sort of way. What really brought this book down for me, though, was the weird pacing and plot structure. Like, if you told me that this book was published serially as short stories and then compiled later, I would not be surprised. It's very, very episodic in a way that clashes with my personal taste a lot and kind of lacks focus at times on where the story is going. Especially in the earlier sections, it doesn't super hang together as well as a book because of how episodic it is. I enjoyed it well enough, though, and wish Tarma and Kethri the best, even though I kind of disagree with the severity of some of their vengeances at some points. But, you know, that's kind of par for the course with stories about women empowering themselves through revenge. Good for them. The song I picked for this one was Catch These Fists by Wet Leg. Alrighty, that's all from this past month. It was a pretty good one overall. Be sure to like and leave a comment below with what you read last month, or if you've read any of these books I talked about today. Otherwise, catch you next time. Bye-bye.